I found out my fiancé was planning to humiliate me at our wedding, so I destroyed his life before he could destroy mine. That's it. That's the whole ridiculous, gut-wrenching origin of everything that happened. She was looking for the Spotify login on his laptop. He'd left it at our apartment before heading to his bachelor party, and there it was. A browser tab he'd forgotten to close. A forum I'd never heard of, filled with men I'd never want to meet, and my future husband right in the middle of it all. Let me back up. My name is Corinne, and until 46 days ago, I thought I was living the life I'd always wanted. Engaged to a man I'd been with for 4 years, planning a wedding that had consumed most of my free time and savings, surrounded by friends and family who kept telling me how lucky I was. The venue was booked, a gorgeous estate with gardens that overlooked a lake. The dress was hanging in my closet, $8,000 of silk and hope. The honeymoon was planned. The seating chart was finalized, and I was exactly 2 weeks away from saying I do to someone I thought I knew. My bachelorette party was supposed to be the last hurrah. Nothing crazy. My friends know I'm not really the Vegas type. Just a night in at my apartment with my closest girlfriends. Too much champagne, some nostalgic rom-coms, and maybe a few embarrassing stories from college. My fiancé, I can't bring myself to use his name anymore, had his bachelor party the same night. Traditional, I guess. Bad luck to see each other before the wedding, and all that superstitious nonsense that now feels like the universe's cruelest joke. Around 11, my best friend wandered into the bedroom looking for the laptop. We wanted to set up a playlist, something to get everyone dancing after we'd watched enough Katherine Heigl movies. His laptop was right there on the desk where he always left it. The expensive one he'd bought himself last Christmas. The one he was always glued to during work-from-home days. She opened it to search for Spotify, and that's when she saw the browser tab. She called me into the bedroom with this weird, strangled voice. I thought maybe she'd found something embarrassing. Old photos, a weird search history, the kind of thing you laugh about later over wine. But when I walked in, she was just standing there, laptop in hand, face completely white. She looked like she'd seen a ghost. Except ghosts don't make you want to throw up. "Sit down," she said. And I knew. I didn't know what exactly, but I knew something was about to break. The forum was one of those toxic masculinity rabbit holes. The kind that starts with self-improvement podcasts about becoming a high-value man and ends with men calling women females unironically, trading tips on manipulation, and celebrating each other's cruelty like some kind of twisted support group. He'd been a member for 8 months. 8 months of posting, commenting, receiving coaching from veteran members who treated emotional destruction like a competitive sport. And his project? His crowning achievement that would earn him respect and status among these strangers on the internet? Rejecting me at the altar. I read everything. Dozens of messages detailing exactly how he planned to do it. Which words to use for maximum impact. They'd workshopped his rejection speech together, multiple drafts, feedback rounds, how to position himself so everyone could see my face crumble. The senior members had given him tips like they were reviewing a business proposal. One guy suggested he wait until I'd already said my vows before his rejection. The contrast makes it hit harder, trust me, bro. Another recommended he have someone film it secretly for the forum. A third offered to be in the audience to capture crowd reactions. He'd posted photos of me, pictures I'd sent him privately, pictures from our life together, vacation shots, candid moments I'd thought were just ours, all accompanied by commentary that made me feel like I needed a shower. He called me an investment that would pay dividends in masculine respect. He described intimate moments we'd shared in terms so degrading I had to stop reading twice just to breathe. The thread had hundreds of replies. Encouragement, advice, men cheering him on like he was training for a marathon instead of planning to emotionally destroy someone who loved him. "She sounds like she has no idea," one wrote. "Perfect target." Another. "Can't wait for the update. These altar rejections are legendary." In the living room, I could hear our other friends laughing. Someone had just told a joke about the groom's nervous energy. Little did they know. The champagne was flowing. My bachelorette party was in full swing, and I was sitting in the bedroom discovering that the man I loved had been planning my public destruction for months. I don't remember much after that initial discovery. I know I didn't scream. I know I didn't cry. Not yet. I just sat there, scrolling through 8 months of his posts, while my best friend held my hand and the party continued without us. Every few minutes, someone would call for me. "Corinne, come take this shot with us." And my best friend would yell back that I was on an important call. She lied for me for 3 hours while my life unraveled in silence. The last guests left around 3 in the morning. The apartment was littered with those stupid penis-shaped straws someone had thought were hilarious, half-empty bottles of Prosecco, a deflated balloon that said bride-to-be in glittering letters. I was curled up on the bathroom floor, having just vomited for the second time, my perfectly manicured bachelorette nails pressing into my palms hard enough to leave marks. My best friend sat next to me on the cold tile, not saying anything, just being there. At some point, she made tea. At some point, the sun started coming up. At some point, I stopped shaking enough to hold a phone. We spent the rest of the night investigating, me on my phone, her on the laptop, piecing together 8 months of digital breadcrumbs. I found the podcast that had started it all. Some self-proclaimed masculinity guru with 1 million followers who talked about female nature and hypergamy, like he'd discovered secret truths instead of just repackaging misogyny for insecure men. My fiancé had started listening during his commute, back when he said he was getting into self-improvement. I'd thought he meant working out more. I watched his progression in real time through his post history. Early comments just agreeing with others, finding his footing in this new community. Then sharing frustrations about feminist culture and how men were losing their place in society. Then actively seeking advice on how to regain power in his relationship. Our relationship. He posted about our arguments, about things I'd said in confidence, about my red flags, wanting to split chores equally, having male friends from work, once suggesting he talk to a therapist about his anger issues. The veteran members had guided him toward the altar rejection. It was apparently a rite of passage in this community, the ultimate proof of masculine power. There was even a leaderboard tracking successful altar denials, ranked by how dramatic the fallout was. Public tears were worth more points. Family present added a multiplier. Someone had been rejected on a live stream for maximum impact. That one was still at the top. The worst part? I recognized 2 of the usernames in his threads, 2 of his groomsmen. They'd commented on his plan. They'd encouraged it. One of them had written, "Can't wait to see the look on her face," with a laughing emoji. The other had offered to stand in a specific position so he could film without being obvious. I alternated between hysteric sobbing and complete emotional numbness. My best friend made tea that went cold 4 times because neither of us could focus on anything normal. I think I called my mom at some point, but I don't remember what I said. She thought it was wedding jitters. I let her think that. Around 7 in the morning, I heard his key in the lock. I had maybe 30 seconds of warning. My best friend grabbed the laptop and shoved it under a pillow. I wiped my face with my hands and somehow arranged my features into something that might pass for tired. He came bounding in, all smiles and residual bachelor party energy, reeking of beer and cigars and whatever lies he'd been telling himself. "Hey, beautiful," he said, like he hadn't spent the last 8 months planning to destroy me in front of everyone we knew. "How was your night?" They'd agreed not to see each other before the wedding, some superstition thing that now felt like cosmic irony. He kissed my forehead, told me he'd missed me, said he couldn't wait to marry me in 2 weeks. 14 days, he said, holding up his hands. 14 days and you're officially stuck with me forever. I almost screamed the truth right there. Almost showed him the laptop and watched his face change. Almost asked him why. What had I done to deserve this? Who even was this person I'd been sleeping next to for 4 years? But something stopped me. Maybe survival instinct. Maybe the small, cold part of me that was already planning. Headache, I managed. Too much champagne, I think I need to sleep. He laughed, made some comment about pacing myself for the reception, and went to shower. I stood in our kitchen listening to him sing off-key behind the bathroom door, some pop song about forever love, the audacity, and felt something inside me shift from devastation to determination. I wasn't going to let him humiliate me. I was going to figure out how to survive this, and then I was going to make sure he never did this to anyone else. I spent the next week sick. Migraine, I told everyone. Couldn't get out of bed, couldn't look at screens, needed darkness and quiet. My coworkers sent flowers. His mother dropped off soup. My own mother offered to fly in early to take care of me. Everyone was so worried, so kind, so completely unaware that I was spending every moment they thought I was resting, making calls from under the blankets and sending emails at 2 in the morning. The private investigator was expensive. $2,200 for a week of work, which seemed insane until I realized I was about to lose $50,000 in wedding deposits anyway. She was recommended by a friend of a friend, someone who'd gone through a bad divorce and needed proof of infidelity. My situation was different, I explained. I already had proof. I just needed to know if there was more. She confirmed everything within 3 days. No hidden life, no secret family, no financial crimes. Just a man who wanted to publicly humiliate his partner for internet points. "This is really it?" she asked during our final call. Like she couldn't quite believe it either. In her experience, there was usually more. Affairs, hidden debts, secret addictions. But my fiancé was apparently singular in his cruelty. He just wanted to watch me cry in front of 200 people and post about it afterward. The lawyer specializing in emotional damages was more helpful. Though her news wasn't great, her name was Rebecca, or rather, that's what I'll call her, and she worked out of a small office in a building that also housed a dentist and an accounting firm. Not the glamorous legal representation you see in movies, but she came highly recommended by a domestic abuse support organization I'd contacted in desperation. I could sue, technically. Intentional infliction of emotional distress. But proving it would be hard. The forum posts could be dismissed as fantasy or venting or men just talking. Defense lawyers loved those arguments. And any public exposure could backfire. Defamation suits, invasion of privacy claims for accessing his laptop without permission. The legal system, she explained gently, wasn't built for this kind of betrayal. "I'm not saying don't fight," she said. "I'm saying know what you're getting into. These cases are long, expensive, and emotionally draining. And even if you win, the victory might not feel like one." I found support groups online. Women who'd been publicly humiliated by partners, who'd survived things I couldn't have imagined before that night. One had been proposed to just to be rejected in front of her family at a holiday dinner. Her boyfriend had done it for a TikTok prank channel. Another had her fiancé call off their wedding via text message while she was sitting in the makeup chair. Full bridal look, photographer, waiting in the lobby. They didn't offer solutions, just survival stories. "Justice rarely comes," one of them wrote, "but surviving does. That's what we have. We survived, and that's more than they expected." I documented everything anyway. Screenshots authenticated at a notary. Yes, that's a thing, and yes, it costs money I shouldn't have been spending 2 weeks before my wedding. I drove 45 minutes to a notary public who specialized in digital evidence, sat in her fluorescent-lit office while she verified timestamps and URLs, and paid $300 for official stamps on printouts of my fiancé describing how he planned to make me cry. Consultations with 2 different lawyers to understand my options from multiple angles. The second one was more optimistic than Rebecca. He thought there might be a harassment angle, something about the coordination between multiple people. But his retainer was $8,000, and I was hemorrhaging money into wedding costs I couldn't recover. I wasn't sure what I was going to do with any of this documentation, but I wanted ammunition if I needed it. I wanted proof that couldn't be dismissed or explained away or lost to a conveniently crashed hard drive. And I started making plans. On day 8 after the discovery, I made my first move. I'd barely slept, running on coffee and adrenaline and a cold fury that had settled somewhere in my chest like a stone. I texted one of the groomsmen, the one who'd written about wanting to see my face, and asked him to meet for coffee. Casual. Just wanted to touch base before the big day. He was my fiancé's college roommate. We'd had dinner together dozens of times, celebrated birthdays, gone on group trips. His girlfriend, now wife, had been in my bridal party shortlist before she got pregnant and moved to another state. I'd thought we were friends. I'd thought he cared about me, at least a little. He showed up to the coffee shop looking nervous, which was satisfying in a way I didn't fully understand. I ordered a latte and made small talk for exactly 4 minutes, long enough for him to relax, to think this was just wedding coordination, before I pulled out my phone. "I know," I said simply, and showed him his own comments. Watching his face go through shock, then fear, then desperate calculation was almost worth everything I'd been through. Almost. His eyes darted around the coffee shop like he was looking for an exit. His hand trembled as he set down his cup. For a long moment, he didn't say anything at all. Then the excuses started. He stammered that he thought it was just internet talk. Said nobody actually believed any of it. Said he'd tried to talk my fiancé out of it. Tried so hard, really, I had to believe him. Said he'd been going through a rough patch himself and the forum had seemed like support. I showed him the thread where he'd called the plan epic and suggested the specific camera angle for maximum impact. He went quiet. "You're out of the wedding," I told him, my voice steadier than I felt. "You'll tell everyone it's a work conflict. You won't warn him. You won't tell him anything about this conversation. And if you do," I paused. Let the silence stretch. "I will send your comments to your employer, your wife, and everyone on your social media friends list. Your in-laws, your parents, everyone." He tried to negotiate, offered to delete his account, offered to apologize, to explain, to make it up to me somehow. He actually started crying, which would have been more moving if I hadn't just read his detailed suggestions for how to capture my tears on film. "Do we understand each other?" I asked. He understood. I did the same thing with the second groomsman 2 days later. Same coffee shop, different results. This one was angrier at first. Tried to tell me I was overreacting, that I'd violated privacy by reading their private conversations, that none of this was a big deal and I was making something out of nothing. I let him talk. Then I showed him the archived version of the thread that the PI had found, the one with all the comments he'd deleted, including the one where he'd offered to accidentally spill a drink on me at the reception to add to the chaos. He cried too, eventually. Said he'd been going through a divorce, that he hated women, that he didn't mean it, that he'd been depressed. Maybe he was telling the truth about some of it. Maybe the forum had caught him at his lowest and twisted something broken into something cruel. Didn't matter. He was out too. "And just so we're clear," I added, "if I find out you've warned him, I'm going directly to your ex-wife's divorce attorney. I'm sure she'd love to know what you've been saying about women online during custody negotiations." Of course, one of them broke. The nervous one. The college roommate. I should have known. He'd never been good at keeping secrets, even in low-stakes situations. He texted my fiancé something about me acting weird, asking if everything was okay between us, hinting that maybe the wedding stress was getting to me. My fiancé started asking questions. Was I okay? Was something wrong? Did I want to talk about anything? He brought me flowers, my favorites, the ones he'd only remembered twice in 4 years, and made dinner one night. Hovering anxiously while I pushed food around my plate, I smiled and said pre-wedding jitters. Happens to everyone. Everyone told me their weddings were stressful. My mom said my dad nearly called off their wedding 3 times, news to me. His sister said she'd had a meltdown the week before hers. Everyone had a story about cold feet, about second thoughts, about the weight of forever pressing down. I performed calm for 2 more days while finalizing my plan. My strategy crystallized over the following nights. Written in Notes app entries I deleted immediately after making decisions. I wasn't going to let him humiliate me at the altar. But I also wasn't going to give him the dramatic confrontation he probably fantasized about. The crying, the screaming, the public breakdown that would make a great story for his forum buddies. Instead, I was going to do something much worse. I was going to control the narrative. 2 weeks before the wedding. That was my timeline. Long enough to cancel everything properly, to give vendors notice even if they wouldn't refund anything, to alert guests so they didn't show up to an empty venue. Short enough that all the deposits would be gone anyway. I'd checked the contracts and we were well past any cancellation grace periods. The money was lost either way. What I could control was the story. I would send a message to every guest simultaneously. Factual, brief, evidence attached, but edited to protect my own privacy. No hysteria, no begging for sympathy, no emotional manipulation. Just the truth, delivered calmly, before he had a chance to spin his own version of events. My lawyer approved the plan with some modifications. Edit the screenshots carefully. Remove anything that showed my own intimate details, anything that could be used against me later. Don't include any identifying information about the forum that could be traced back to illegal access of his computer. Make it absolutely clear this was my decision, made with full knowledge of the consequences, not a spontaneous breakdown. And Corinne, she added at the end of our call, be prepared for him to fight back. These men always do. They'll claim you're crazy, that you fabricated everything, that you're the abuser. You need to be ready for that. I was ready for that. I was ready for everything. I transferred $18,000 from our joint account to my personal one, exactly half of what we'd saved together. I had a lawyer confirm this was legal, that taking 50% of joint funds wasn't theft. Withdrawing my share of our down payment fund, our vacation savings, our emergency cushion. I left exactly half for him, down to the cent. I started secretly moving my important documents to my best friend's apartment. Birth certificate, passport, the deed to the car I'd owned before we met, my grandmother's jewelry that I'd kept in our shared safe. I photographed everything valuable that was mine, the art I'd brought into the relationship, the furniture from my old apartment, the kitchen equipment I'd accumulated over years of actually enjoying cooking, just in case. Meanwhile, I kept planning our wedding, confirmed the seating chart with the coordinator, approved the final menu after a tasting I barely remembered attending, smiled at the florist when she showed me the centerpiece samples, white roses and eucalyptus, classic and elegant, flowers I'd never actually see on tables. Every conversation was a performance, every kiss from him a test of my acting abilities. Every night lying next to him in our bed felt like sleeping with a stranger. And I guess in some ways I was. I'd never known this person at all. The 30 days before I sent that message were the longest of my life. Each morning I woke up next to him and felt like a spy in enemy territory. Every movement calculated. Every word measured. He'd roll over, still half asleep, and pull me close, and I'd have to force myself not to flinch. "Morning, beautiful." He'd mumble into my hair. "Love you." I'd say it back because that's what my character would do. The loving fiancé. The happy bride-to-be. Method acting for survival. The bridal shower was particularly surreal. His mother hosted it at a restaurant we'd chosen together for the engagement party, a place that now felt contaminated by memory. She'd invited 40 women, colleagues and cousins and friends of friends, all gathered to celebrate a marriage she'd helped plan for over a year. They gave speeches. His mother talked about the first time he'd brought me home, how she'd known immediately I was the one. His sister described how he'd called her after our third date, giddy, saying he'd finally found someone worth keeping. They'd prepared a slideshow of our relationship milestones. First vacation, first apartment, the proposal on the beach at sunset. I watched photos of us cycle across the screen and wondered when exactly the man in those pictures had started planning to destroy the woman next to him. Was it before or after the trip to Maine? Had he already joined the forum when we were apartment hunting together? Or did that come later? Guests handed me carefully wrapped presents: a Dutch oven, Egyptian cotton sheets, a fancy blender, a set of matching bathrobes with Mr. and Mrs. embroidered on the back. For a home we would never share, for a life we would never build. I smiled and thanked everyone and wrote careful notes for thank you cards I knew I'd never send. His mother pulled me aside near the end. "I'm so happy you're joining our family," she said, eyes welling up. "He's never been this happy. You've changed him." I hugged her and wondered if she'd still feel that way in 2 weeks. My final dress fitting happened exactly 3 weeks before the scheduled wedding. The boutique was on a tree-lined street in a part of town I rarely visited, the kind of place where the salespeople offer you champagne the moment you walk in and everything costs 3 times what it should. I stood on that little platform, surrounded by mirrors, while the seamstress pinned and adjusted $8,000 worth of silk and lace. The dress was everything I'd imagined when I was a little girl playing bride with my mother's tablecloth: fitted bodice, flowing skirt, tiny buttons all the way down the back. It had taken 3 fittings to get right, and now it was perfect. I looked like every bride is supposed to look: radiant, hopeful, like my life was about to begin. "You're going to take his breath away," the boutique owner said, clasping her hands together. Instead, I was mentally calculating whether I could resell the dress, how much I'd lose on it, whether it was worth even trying. Spoiler: wedding dresses depreciate like used cars. I'd be lucky to get 1,000 back. "It's perfect," I said, because that's what brides say. The rehearsal dinner was my masterpiece of deception. Both families gathered at the restaurant his parents had chosen, an upscale Italian place with dim lighting and prices that made my father wince. 34 people, all convinced they were celebrating love. His father gave a toast about how proud he was of his son for finding a real partner, not like those other girls who only wanted his success. I wondered if he knew about the forum, if the apple hadn't fallen far from the tree. Probably not. But the worldview had to come from somewhere. My father gave a toast about how he'd known I'd chosen well the first time he met my fiancé, how relieved he was to know I'd be taken care of. I wanted to tell him I could take care of myself. I wanted to tell him that being taken care of by this man meant being destroyed for entertainment. Then my fiancé stood up to give his toast. The room hushed. He held his champagne glass with that steady hand I'd once found so reassuring, and he looked at me with an expression I'd have sworn was love. "To my beautiful bride," he said. "4 years ago, I met a woman who changed everything. She made me want to be better. She made me believe in forever. She made me understand what it means to truly love someone." Everyone made that collective "aw" sound. His mother dabbed at her eyes with a napkin. "I can't wait to marry you," he continued. "I can't wait to wake up next to you every morning. I can't wait to build a life together, to grow old together, to prove that real love still exists in this crazy world." He raised his glass. Everyone followed. "To my beautiful bride. To forever." I raised my glass and smiled and took a sip of wine that tasted like ash. Somewhere, I imagined, the forum was cheering. My best friend stayed over that night. She'd been sleeping on my couch most nights by then, ready to hold my hand through the panic attacks that came like clockwork around 2 a.m. We lay in the dark of the living room while he slept in the bedroom, blissfully unaware, and she whispered that I was the strongest person she knew. "I don't feel strong," I whispered back. "I feel like a bomb waiting to go off. You're going to be okay." she said. 2 more weeks. Then it's over. 2 more weeks. 14 days. Then I could stop pretending. 14 days before what would have been my wedding. I woke up at 5:45 in the morning. My best friend was already awake, sitting at my kitchen table with her phone in her hand and 2 cups of coffee going cold in front of her. She'd been ready for hours. Neither of us had really slept. We'd drafted the message together over the previous week, rewrote it maybe 20 times, agonizing over every word, made it shorter, then longer, then shorter again. Too emotional and I'd seem hysterical. Too cold and I'd seem calculating. The balance had to be perfect. In the end, it was barely 200 words. Factual, clear, devastating. The wedding scheduled for 14 days from now is canceled. I discovered that my fiancé has been an active participant in an online forum focused on toxic masculinity for 8 months. His stated goal, documented extensively in his posts, was to reject me publicly at the altar as a challenge to earn status in this community. I have attached edited screenshots as evidence, though I have removed content that involves my private information. I ask that you respect my privacy during this time and refrain from contacting me unless I reach out first. 4 images attached. His posts about the rejection plan with timestamps visible, comments from the groomsmen I'd already expelled, screenshots showing veteran members coaching him on technique. Nothing that showed the really degrading stuff. I wasn't going to humiliate myself in the process of exposing him. My finger hovered over the send button for maybe 30 seconds. My best friend reached over and put her hand on mine, not pushing, just there. You don't have to do this, she said quietly. You could just disappear, change your number, move away, never explain to anyone. I'd thought about that. In my darkest moments over the past 46 days, I'd thought about just running, quitting my job, moving across the country, starting over somewhere no one knew my name or my story. It would be easier in some ways. Less confrontation, less fallout, less having to watch people choose sides. But then he would win. He'd tell everyone I got cold feet, that I was unstable, that he was the victim of a flighty woman who couldn't commit. And worse, he'd do it again. To some other woman who wouldn't find the tab, who wouldn't have a friend willing to dig through 8 months of posts, who would actually stand at that altar and have her heart shattered in front of everyone she loved. I couldn't let that happen. I'm sure, I said, and I pressed send. 203 people received that message simultaneously. Family, friends, coworkers, acquaintances, his side and mine, the minister who was supposed to marry us, the photographer who'd done our engagement shoot, the caterer, the florist, the band. Everyone who'd been invited to witness our union now witnessed its destruction. My best friend burst into tears the moment it was done. Not sad tears. Relief. Pure, desperate, exhausted relief. She'd been carrying this secret for 46 days, watching me pretend everything was fine, knowing what I was about to face, unable to warn anyone or process it out loud. She'd held me through panic attacks and read legal documents and helped me pack bags I'd hidden in her apartment. She'd lied to everyone we knew for almost 7 weeks. She held me while her body shook with sobs, and for the first time since the night she found those messages, I felt something other than cold determination. I felt free. The responses started coming in within minutes. My phone began buzzing continuously, notification after notification stacking up faster than I could read them. My mother called first, crying so hard I could barely understand her. Once I figured out they were support tears, not anger tears, I started crying too. "Come home," she kept saying. "Come home right now. Dad's booking a flight." My sister sent 17 text messages in a row, each more furious than the last, all directed at him. "I will kill him." "Where does he live?" "I'm calling a lawyer." "No, wait, I'm calling his mom." My brother-in-law texted a simple, "I'm so sorry, we're here." My niece, who was supposed to be flower girl, sent a voice memo asking what happened to Corinne's wedding and could she still wear the pretty dress anyway. That one almost broke me. My dad simply wrote, "I'm proud of you. Come home whenever you want. We love you." His side was different. His mother called at 7:30, voice trembling with something between grief and anger, begging me to talk it through before destroying her son's life. When I asked if she'd read the screenshots, she said she had, and there had to be an explanation. I hung up on her. His father sent a message I still haven't deleted, calling me a crazy bitch who clearly hacked his computer, and demanding I retract my lies before he involved lawyers. His sister blocked me on everything without saying a word. Our mutual friends split almost immediately. Some sent supportive messages, others sent confused ones, asking if this was real, if I was okay, if there was some misunderstanding. A few, people I'd thought were my friends too, went silent in ways that told me everything about which side they'd chosen. He tried to call 47 times that first day. I know because I watched each notification pop up and disappear. He left messages that I listened to later when I was numb enough to handle them. The progression was fascinating in a horrible way. First confused. "Corinne, what is this? What's going on?" Call me back. Then angry. "This is insane. You're ruining our wedding over some internet bullshit? You had no right to read those messages. Call me back right now." Then pleading. "Baby, please. I can explain. It's not what you think. Please just talk to me. I love you. We can fix this." Then threatening. "I'm calling a lawyer. You've defamed me. You've invaded my privacy. You think you can just send this to everyone and there won't be consequences?" The last one, around midnight, was just silence. Breathing. A long pause. Then a click. His counter-narrative went live within hours. According to his version, which spread through mutual friends like wildfire, I'd broken into his laptop and fabricated evidence because I had cold feet about commitment. He told people I was mentally unstable and that he'd been trying to help me for months. He said I'd been acting strange lately, at least that part was true, and that he'd been worried about me. He painted himself as a victim of a paranoid, vindictive woman who couldn't handle the pressure of a wedding. A few people believed him. Most didn't. The screenshots were pretty hard to explain away. His own words, his own username, timestamps that matched up with dates we'd been together. People reached out to tell me they'd seen the evidence and they believed me. People I'd never been close to suddenly became allies. By the end of that first day, I had 150 responses. Overwhelming support from my side. Confused silence from mutual friends. And 6 people who blocked me entirely, apparently deciding that not choosing a side meant choosing his. I slept 14 hours that night. First real sleep in almost 2 months. The next 2 weeks were a blur of logistics and lawyers and learning just how expensive it is to cancel a wedding that was already paid for. The venue wanted their full deposit. $22,000 handed over in installments throughout our engagement, now vanished into a cancellation clause I'd signed without really reading. "I'm sorry for your situation," the coordinator said when I called, "but the contract is very clear." She didn't sound sorry. The photographer kept $5,000. The caterer kept $3,000. Florist, $1,200. Band, $800. Cake, $450. Event rentals, another $2,000. The string quartet for the ceremony, $500. The calligrapher who'd done our invitations, $300. Technically, I could have asked for that back, but she was a friend of a friend and the invitations were already printed. Final count, $52,000. Gone. Evaporated into deposits that would fund someone else's happy day. 3 years of savings between us, reduced to cancellation clauses and sorry but business is business conversations. I cried looking at my bank statements. Not for him. I was past crying for him. For myself. For the future I'd thought I was building, reduced to line items and cancellation fees. For the down payment on a house that would now never happen. For the financial setback that would take years to recover from. The legal battle started almost immediately. His family hired an attorney the day after my message went out. His father's money, his mother's fury. Their argument, outlined in a letter that arrived by certified mail exactly 1 week after my announcement, was threefold. First, invasion of privacy. I'd accessed his laptop without permission, read his personal communications, and distributed them publicly. Second, defamation. The screenshots were taken out of context and painted him in a false light that damaged his reputation. Third, intentional infliction of emotional distress. Against him, not me, because apparently exposing someone's plan to hurt you is the real crime. My lawyer wasn't surprised. "They're trying to scare you into settling," Rebecca said during an emergency consultation. "Make you think you did something wrong so you'll agree to a gag order and some financial concession. This is standard intimidation for these cases." But I had documentation. I had authenticated screenshots with notary stamps. I had statements from the 2 groomsmen I'd confronted, both of whom had crumbled under pressure and agreed to provide written testimony about what they'd witnessed in exchange for me not exposing them publicly. And I had the forum itself, which, despite his attempts to delete his account, had been archived by someone who'd been watching the drama unfold. Apparently, toxic masculinity forums are also subject to people who screenshot everything for posterity. The depositions were brutal. We started them 2 months after my message, in a conference room at his lawyer's office that smelled like old coffee and carpet cleaner. His lawyer was good, I'll give him that. A man in his 50s with sharp eyes and a voice that made everything sound like a reasonable question. He spent 3 hours asking me why I'd accessed the laptop without permission to find a playlist, like any partner might. Whether I had a history of paranoid behavior? I'd once Googled an ex, so sure. If I'd ever been diagnosed with any mental health conditions, anxiety, which he immediately tried to use against me. Whether I'd manufactured evidence to avoid a wedding I'd clearly never wanted. I produced notarized timestamps proving I hadn't. I cried once during a particularly pointed question about whether I'd invaded his privacy because I was already looking for a reason to leave. My lawyer objected, but the damage was done. They'd made me cry on the record. The worst part? He was in the room, watching. I hadn't seen him since before I sent the message. And there he was, sitting across a conference table, looking smaller than I remembered. Not the confident man who'd planned my destruction in meticulous detail. Just a guy in a blazer who wouldn't meet my eyes. He didn't look evil. He just looked tired. And sad. And somehow that made it worse. My social life split down the middle like someone had drawn a line. Of the 12 couples we'd known together, friends from his work, my work, college, the neighborhood, 8 chose him or chose neutrality. And neutrality, in a situation like this, is choosing him. They stopped reaching out. They unfollowed me on social media. They made it clear through silence that they weren't going to be involved. The remaining 4 couples reached out with support. But our friendships never quite recovered. How do you get brunch with someone who saw you at your most vulnerable? How do you go back to casual after they've watched you fall apart? I lost 12 pounds in those first 2 weeks after the message. Not trying to, just couldn't eat. My sleep schedule was destroyed, swinging between 14-hour crashes and nights where I didn't sleep at all. I had 2 panic attacks at work, both in the bathroom, both witnessed by colleagues who pretended not to notice when I emerged red-eyed and shaking. I almost quit everything. Almost told my lawyer to drop the case. Almost moved out of state. Started over somewhere no one knew my name or my story. Almost let him win through pure exhaustion. But my best friend talked me down. He doesn't get to win, she said during one of our 3 a.m. kitchen floor sessions. He doesn't get to humiliate you publicly or privately or legally. You fight. So I fought. 2.5 years. That's how long it took to get to resolution. 791 days of legal filings, depositions, motions, and counter-motions. 791 days of seeing his name in my email inbox and feeling my stomach drop. 791 days of wondering if today would be the day it finally ended. The case dragged on for reasons that felt both bureaucratic and personal. His lawyers requested extensions, filed motions to dismiss, challenged the authentication of the screenshots. My lawyers responded, requested documents, deposed the groomsmen who'd eventually agreed to testify. Discovery took 8 months. Mediation failed twice. We were scheduled for trial 3 times, only to have it postponed at the last minute for scheduling conflicts. The settlement came on a Tuesday in October, 2 years and 7 months after my wedding was supposed to happen. I was sitting in Rebecca's office, surrounded by file boxes that documented every stage of this nightmare, when she got the call. $28,000. A little more than half of what I'd lost. His lawyers had fought for less, much less, insisting that I'd been the real aggressor, that I'd destroyed his life over locker room talk. But the archived forum posts had made their case difficult. Hard to argue that the screenshots were out of context when the entire internet could see the context, the coaching, the encouragement, the detailed planning that had gone into my humiliation. He signed an agreement admitting errors in judgment without admitting criminal wrongdoing. Careful language designed by lawyers to technically satisfy everyone while actually satisfying no one. I got acknowledgement without an apology. He got to avoid a criminal record. We both got to move on, theoretically. I signed a partial NDA. I could talk about what happened, but I couldn't use his name publicly. No identifying details that would allow someone to find him specifically. He got to stay anonymous while I had to live with everyone knowing I was that girl from that story. It didn't feel like justice. It felt like arithmetic. His life didn't fall apart the way I'd hoped in my darkest moments. No dramatic consequences, no career implosion, no social exile. He still works at the same tech startup that had hired him before any of this happened. When the news spread through his workplace, HR apparently decided it was a personal matter and chose not to get involved. His manager told him to keep his head down and the whole thing would blow over. And it did mostly. His social circle shrunk but didn't disappear. The friends who stayed were loyal, or at least comfortable with who he was. The ones who left, well, he'd probably tell you they were never real friends anyway. His family took 6 months to reach out to me directly. His mother came alone, met me at a coffee shop near my new apartment, and cried into her latte for 20 minutes straight. I raised a monster and I didn't see it, she kept saying. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I believe she meant it. I don't know if it matters. An apology doesn't undo the damage. It doesn't give me back the $52,000 or the 2.5 years of legal hell, or the nights I spent wondering if I'd ever trust anyone again. It's just words, spoken too late, by someone who could have seen the signs if she'd been looking. The 2 groomsmen testified against him in depositions. Not because they suddenly developed consciences. I don't think either of them ever really grasped what they'd been part of, but because my lawyer made it very clear their involvement could be exposed if they didn't cooperate. Self-preservation beats loyalty every time, apparently. They're both still in his life. Though I hear things are strained. Trust issues all around. I've been in therapy for over 2 years now. Weekly sessions, sometimes twice weekly when things get bad. My therapist's name is Dr. Chen, not her real name, but that's what I'll call her. And she specializes in betrayal trauma. Apparently that's a whole field of psychology. Apparently what happened to me has a clinical framework and documented treatment protocols. That was simultaneously comforting and horrifying. I was diagnosed with complex PTSD, the kind that comes from prolonged psychological trauma rather than a single event. Makes sense when you think about it. 8 months of loving someone who was planning my destruction. 46 days of pretending everything was fine while plotting my own survival. 2.5 years of legal warfare that kept reopening wounds just as they started to heal. I still have symptoms. Hypervigilance. I can't relax in my own apartment sometimes. Always waiting for something bad to happen. Trust issues. Obvious. Intrusive thoughts. I'll be making dinner or watching TV, and suddenly I'm back in that bedroom, reading those messages, feeling the floor drop out from under me. But it's getting better. Dr. Chen says healing isn't linear, that there will be setbacks and breakthroughs and long plateaus where nothing seems to change. She's usually right. I sold the engagement ring last year. Took it to 3 different jewelers before I found one who would give me a fair price. $6,500 for a ring that had cost $8,000 when he bought it. Diamonds depreciate almost as badly as wedding dresses, it turns out. I donated all of it to an organization that provides mental health services to women leaving abusive relationships. It felt right. Better than having it sit in a drawer, reminding me of everything I almost became. A viral video, a forum trophy, a cautionary tale told by men who wanted to feel powerful. I ran into him once about a year ago. A grocery store in a neighborhood I didn't think he frequented anymore. He'd moved after everything happened, supposedly to be closer to work. But I suspect it was to avoid running into mutual friends who'd heard the story. I was reaching for avocados. He was standing by the tomatoes. We made eye contact, and for one frozen moment, neither of us moved. He looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically, just diminished. Like the confident man who'd planned my destruction in meticulous detail had been deflated into someone ordinary and slightly sad. His hair was longer, grayer at the temples. He was wearing a t-shirt I'd bought him, which felt like a violation somehow. He opened his mouth like he wanted to say something, then closed it. Opened it again. I watched his face cycle through emotions I couldn't quite identify. Surprise, shame, maybe regret, maybe something else entirely. Then he turned and walked quickly toward the frozen foods section. Practically fled, really, leaving his half-full cart abandoned by the produce. I felt nothing. Not anger, not satisfaction, not even relief. Just a kind of blank recognition, like seeing a stranger whose face was vaguely familiar from a dream you can't quite remember. After everything, the discovery, the planning, the message, the legal battle, the therapy, the slow reconstruction of my life, he'd become irrelevant. A character from a story that happened to someone I used to be. I bought my avocados and went home. I'm still single. By choice for now, though my mother has started not so subtly mentioning nice young men she's met at church. Dating feels like a minefield I'm not ready to navigate. How do you trust again after something like this? How do you let someone close when the last person who was close was planning to destroy you for entertainment? My therapist says I'm making progress. That the fact I'm even thinking about dating again is a sign of healing. That someday I'll meet someone and the fear won't be the first thing I feel. Some days I believe her. Other days I download dating apps, stare at the profiles, and delete them without swiping. Baby steps. I still have nightmares sometimes. The altar, the rejection, the faces of 200 people watching me crumble. In the dreams, it happens the way he planned it. I walk down the aisle, heart full of love and hope, and I say my vows, the beautiful words I'd written about partnership and forever. And then it's his turn. He looks at me with that expression I used to think was love, and he says, I don't. Clear. Loud. For everyone to hear. In the dreams, someone always laughs. Sometimes it's the groomsman. Sometimes it's his father. Sometimes it's just a faceless crowd, all pointing at me while I stand there in my $8,000 dress, trying to understand what just happened. I wake up with my heart pounding, sheets tangled, and I have to remind myself that it never happened, that I stopped it before it could, that I read those messages and made a plan and burned the whole thing down on my own terms. That's the thing no one tells you about this kind of survival. It's not triumphant. There's no moment of applause. No vindication scene where everyone realizes you were right all along. No dramatic justice that makes everything worth it. You just continue. You wake up every day a little less broken than the day before, and eventually you realize you're living a life you built from the ruins of the one you thought you'd have. My best friend got married last spring. Small ceremony, intimate reception, nothing like the production our wedding was supposed to be. I was her maid of honor. Standing at an altar again felt like something I needed to do, like exposure therapy for wedding-related trauma. Her husband is wonderful. Husband is kind, genuine, the kind of person who looks at her like she invented sunlight. When they exchanged vows, he cried. When she said, I do, her voice was steady and sure. When they kissed, everyone cheered, and for once the celebration felt real. I cried at her wedding, not sad tears, not even happy tears exactly. Just tears. Release of something I'd been holding for 3 years. Proof that love can be real. That some people mean it when they say forever. That what happened to me wasn't a reflection of what's possible in the world. After the reception, we sat outside the venue in our fancy dresses, sharing a bottle of champagne she'd stolen from the caterers. Thank you, she said, for everything, for being here. Where else would I be? She squeezed my hand. I know it was hard. Being at a wedding again, watching all of that. It was, I admitted, but it was also, I don't know, hopeful? Seeing you happy makes me believe it's still possible. It is possible, she said firmly. For you too, when you're ready, when I'm ready. I don't know when that will be. Maybe next year, maybe never, maybe I'll surprise myself tomorrow. The future feels open in a way it didn't before, not planned out and controlled, but genuinely uncertain in both scary and exciting ways. So that's where I am now. Almost 3 years out from the day my life exploded. Financially recovered mostly. I'll never get back those years of savings, but I've rebuilt enough to feel secure. Emotionally scarred, definitely. The therapy bills are almost as bad as the wedding deposits. Dating apps downloaded and deleted at least 4 times. A therapist who knows my story better than anyone. And a best friend who saved my life because she needed a playlist. I don't know if I'll ever fully trust again. I don't know if I want to. But I do know this. I'm not a forum trophy. I'm not a viral video. I'm not the broken woman crying at an altar while strangers laugh. I'm the woman who found out, made a plan, and burned it all down on her own terms. I'm the woman who documented everything, confronted everyone, and refused to be a victim even when victimhood would have been easier. I'm the woman who spent 2.5 years fighting for acknowledgement and won, even if the victory was imperfect. And honestly, that's going to have to be enough. Some nights, when the insomnia hits and I'm lying in my quiet apartment with too many thoughts, I think about what would have happened if my best friend hadn't needed that playlist, if she'd used her own phone, if the tab hadn't been open, if I'd gone to bed early instead of joining the party. I would have walked down that aisle 2 weeks later. I would have said my vows with my whole heart, and he would have destroyed me in front of everyone I loved while strangers on the internet cheered. Instead, I destroyed him first, or at least, I destroyed his plan. I took away his moment of power and replaced it with accountability. I chose my own pain instead of the pain he'd designed for me. That's not nothing. In a world that doesn't promise justice, in a legal system that barely recognizes this kind of cruelty, in a society that still asks women what they did to deserve it, I survived. I fought. I won. In whatever imperfect way winning is possible when you've been betrayed by someone you trusted with your entire future. The wedding dress is still in my closet. I couldn't sell it. Couldn't stand the thought of someone else wearing it. Couldn't bear to explain why it had never been worn. It hangs in a garment bag at the very back, behind winter coats and old blazers I'll never wear again. Sometimes I forget it's there. Sometimes I remember and the grief hits fresh. But mostly, I've made peace with it. The dress, like the ring, like the relationship, is evidence of a life I thought I was building. It didn't turn out to be real, But the woman who chose that dress, who loved that man, who believed in that future, she was real. She deserved better than what she got. And the woman I am now, she's real too. Scarred and cautious and sometimes still afraid, but also stronger than she knew she could be. Still here, still fighting, still refusing to let anyone else write her story. That's the ending I have. Not the one I planned, not the one I wanted, but the one I made for myself when everything else fell apart. And maybe someday, I'll get a better one. My therapist asked me recently what I would say to him if I had the chance. If he showed up at my door tomorrow, what words would I use? I thought about it for a long time. In the early days, right after the discovery, I had fantasies about confrontation, screaming at him, demanding explanations, making him feel even a fraction of what he'd made me feel. I'd rehearsed speeches in my head, eloquent, devastating monologues about betrayal and cruelty and the death of trust. But now, after everything, I don't think I'd say anything at all. What words could possibly matter? What explanation could undo what he planned? He knows what he did. He knows what it cost me. And anything I might say, any rage or grief or demand for accountability, would just give him what he originally wanted. A reaction. An emotional display. Content? No. If he showed up at my door, I'd close it. Quietly. Without drama or fanfare or the satisfaction of a final word. That's my victory now. Not revenge, not vindication, not even forgiveness. Just indifference. The recognition that he doesn't deserve any more of my energy. My thoughts. My time. He's had too much already. I'm 31 years old. I was supposed to be celebrating my 3rd wedding anniversary this summer. Instead, I'll probably be at brunch with the friends I've made since then. People who know the story but don't define me by it. Who see me as a whole person rather than just a cautionary tale. I've started cooking again. Nothing fancy, just the recipes I used to love before everything got complicated. There's something healing about chopping vegetables and stirring sauces, about creating something nourishing from raw ingredients. My grandmother would approve. I've picked up running, not marathons or anything impressive, just early morning jogs around my neighborhood, watching the city wake up. It started as a way to exhaust myself into sleeping, but now I actually enjoy it. The rhythm of my feet, the gradual strengthening of my lungs, the way problems seem smaller when you're moving. I adopted a cat. His name is Henry. He's orange and very judgmental, and he takes up approximately 70% of my bed, despite being an animal that weighs 9 pounds. Having another heartbeat in my apartment has helped more than I expected. Someone to come home to, even if that someone mostly ignores me in favor of sunbeams and kibble. These are small things, I know. Not the dramatic transformation that makes for good storytelling. But life after trauma isn't dramatic transformation. It's small things. It's remembering to eat breakfast. It's not crying when you see happy couples. It's waking up one day and realizing you haven't thought about him in a week. My best friend is expecting a baby. She called to tell me last month, crying happy tears. And for a moment, I felt the old grief, the life I was supposed to have, the family I'd imagined building. But then it passed, and all that was left was joy for her. Pure, uncomplicated joy. I want you to be the godmother, she said. Will you? Of course, I told her. I wouldn't miss it for the world. And I meant it. Whatever happens next in my life, whether I fall in love again or stay single forever, whether I have children of my own or become the world's most involved aunt, I'll be there for her kid, for the family she's building, for the proof that good things still happen to good people. That's enough for now. That's more than I thought I'd have in those dark days after the discovery. So here I am, still standing, still healing, still figuring out who I am, without the shadow of almost being destroyed. My name is Corinne. I survived something terrible. And tomorrow I'm going to wake up and live another day in the life I chose for myself. That's my story. The real one, not the one he planned to tell.